Hi, and welcome to the second hour of this Thursday edition of Focal Point on AFR Talk. Number to call if you want to join the conversation is 888-589-8840. Maybe we'll start off this second hour with a phone call or two. Let's grab a call from Richard in Daytona Beach, Florida. Richard, thank you for calling and thank you for waiting. And just a reminder, if you live in one of our communities that does not have either a television station that carries our program or one of our stations that are part of our nationwide radio talk network, you can always catch us audio and video streaming at afr.net. Don't forget also, you can go to our Facebook page at Focal Point. Just open up your own Facebook page, type Focal Point in the search bar, it'll pop right up. You can go to our Focal Point Facebook page, encourage you to like it and get used to looking at the information that's there. Also, you can follow me on Twitter at Brian J. Fisher. Let's go to Richard, Daytona Beach. Richard, thanks for calling. Thanks for waiting. What's on your mind?
Hey, what's up, Mr. Fisher? How are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Doing pretty good. Driving across I-10, heading to New Orleans. I'm a over-the-road truck driver. I'm listening to you guys on 88.1, actually, out of Louisiana.
Uh-huh.
But I was listening, and I was wanting to say about Vladimir Putin. My thought to him is I don't think he's pushing his army down there to invade Ukraine. What it seems like more myself is what he's waiting, because I guess Crimea has the right to vote if they want to secede back into Russia, right?
Well, yeah, and I guess the question I guess the question is how much of that is being kind of manipulated or maneuvered by Putin. I mean, I'm one of the first guys to believe that people ought to have the right to self-determination. You know, that's how we became an independent nation. As we said, we think we don't like the government of England. We're going to elect representatives, and we're going to go a different direction. We're going to declare independence. And I think people of Crimea, ought to have the same option. I just don't know how free it is. I mean, I really don't know how coerced that is.
We just shouldn't be policing it is the thing. I mean, if they vote on it and they decide they want to subside back into Russia, then we should give them that right. I mean, it'd be no different if Texas decides they don't want to be part of the U.S. and they vote upon it. You know, those people, the minority that decide they didn't want to be part of their own country, then they should leave. I mean, that's the way the law is written. And, as a conservative myself, I mean, if that's what they believe they want to do, they want to be part of Russia again, then we shouldn't police that. If the majority of the people claim that they don't want to be part of Russia and they say that they, vote upon it that they want to stay part of Ukraine, then if Putin starts to invade, then I do feel that we should, back them up if they ask us for help. But this thing in the U.S. that the government automatically has to police everything that goes on is, kind of crazy because, it costs billions and trillions of dollars for us to go over and fight a war against Vladimir Putin, who's kind of a little off this rocker. He's not really even if they can't establish a military, what you were talking about, the 18-year-old thing, my buddy's from Ukraine, and he said when you turn 18, you have to do 12 months in, the military unless you're already enrolled in college. But, you still don't want to underestimate that. We underestimated the Afghanis and the Iraqis, and look how long this crap's lasted.
Yeah, well, where I think I'm really in sympathy with you, Richard, and this is where, I think my foreign policy, I'm not saying I agree with Ron Paul and Rand Paul all the way down the line, but you've got a lot of Republicans that, they sort of consider themselves hawks, and they want the United States military to intervene all over the world, anywhere there's some kind of crisis like this, where the liberty of some people is at risk. And, you look, Richard, at what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan. I think we had a mission going into those two countries that because there was a threat to our national security in Afghanistan, Taliban responsible for 9/11. Let's go in and get the bad guys, take them out of power. We did that in a matter of months. We should have been in there and out of there. Same in Iraq. Our intelligence services, all the best intelligence services in the world believe that he was nuking up, that he had weapons of mass destruction, intended to use them against us. That represented a threat. We had every right to go in there and take him out. We should have just left instead of staying there because we just made hash out of the thing by sticking around. So I'm with you. I just don't see any fundamental American interests that are at stake right now in Crimea or the Ukraine, and therefore I just don't see a justification for us to deploy our military there. Other people might disagree with me, and I certainly respect it. Anyway, go ahead and finish your thought.
Yeah, and what you were saying about Iraq and Afghanistan, that's at least what they told the general public. it wasn't going over there to take over the country. It was to establish a president that they could control, just like they did with Saddam. You know, I mean, if we can get a president that we can control, then you don't have to have your soldiers and military bases in there. You just have to have one person that can control that region, which we know is impossible to do right now.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Well, you know, when you look at that situation over there, I don't know a lot about it. I'm not an expert by any stretch on Crimea or Ukraine, but I do know, and Rick Dayton confirmed this, that you know there's a pretty high percentage of ethnic Russians in Crimea, and when the borders were drawn up, the Russian government actually did it by design. When they drew the borders of Ukraine, they wanted to be sure that there was a substantial minority of ethnic Russians inside the borders of Ukraine, because they were preparing for the future when they might want to have some reason, some kind of cover, some kind of excuse for going in there, and then that would be their justification, just like Hitler did in the 1930s. So it's actually no accident by Russian design that the Ukraine has such a high percentage of ethnic Russians in there, and we're seeing kind of some of the long-range fruit of that today. And, you know, one of the reasons, Richard, why Europe has been so quiet, you haven't heard anything out of the European Union, nothing, and that's because Russia supplies about 30 to 40% of its oil and gas. And there's a pipeline that runs right across the Ukraine, and it takes, Russia is one of the biggest suppliers, exporters of oil and gas in the world, and 30 to 40% of what Europe uses comes from Russia through a pipeline that goes right across Ukraine. So Europe has to be careful. They really is very little that they can do because they don't want Russia to turn off the tap. All right, Richard, appreciate the call. Thank you for that. Let's grab a call from Mike in Winchester, Virginia here to close out the segment. Mike, what's on your mind?
Well, the other day I heard it said that President Obama was both malevolent and inept.
Yes.
So I think a good nickname for him would be Dark Helmet, the Rick Moranis character from the movie Spaceballs. Dark Helmet.
All right, Rick. Well, that's a good suggestion. We will take that under advisement. You know, and it's interesting what John Bolton said today, and, you know, you're not really seeing much pushback against this. John Bolton saying, look, at CPAC, you know, the national security crisis that we have is Barack Obama. He represents a greater threat to our national security than Vladimir Putin, and you look what he's doing by weakening the military. You know, one of the things that I have mentioned before is you see a number of ways in which President Obama's actions they are weakening the military. How deliberate it is, I guess, you know, you don't really know exactly what's in a guy's heart. But his actions, if he was designing to weaken the military, he couldn't have orchestrated a plan that would do a better job. Repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell, forcing the acceptance of open homosexuality in the United States military. That's affecting morale, readiness, recruitment, retention, all those things. And now we're seeing this purge of high-ranking senior military officials, all the masculine guys. I'm not saying these guys didn't do things where they needed to be punished and reprimanded. I'm not saying that, but they're saying 197 senior officers have been removed from office by this administration. Focal Point, AFR Talk.